The cannons of Europe had gone quiet. Napoleon Bonaparte, no longer just a general, now emperor, stood, crowned by his own hand, feared across the continent, master of what remained of the revolution. He had crushed Italy, bent Austria to his will, crossed the deserts of Egypt with fire and ambition. He believed there was nothing left to conquer. But across the Atlantic, something defied him. Not a nation, not an army, a man. On the island of Saint-Domingue, modern-day Haiti, France's wealthiest colony, stood a former slave turned general, Toussaint Louverture. He had outmaneuvered Spain, repelled Britain, and rebuilt a scorched colony not with fear, but with discipline. Then he did the unthinkable. He wrote a constitution. It didn't ask, it declared slavery abolished forever, all men equal, and at the top, one title, governor for life. Not of a village, not of a rebel outpost, but of the very heart of France's empire. In Paris, the reaction was swift. A black man ruling a colony without permission. The ideals of the revolution had come back like a ghost to haunt its creators. Napoleon didn't hesitate, he didn't debate, he gave the order. 40,000 troops, veterans of the empire, led by his brother-in-law, General Charles Leclerc. Their mission was simple: crush the rebellion by any means necessary. From the hills of Saint-Domingue, Toussaint watched their sails thicken the horizon. He had sent France laws, they had sent him soldiers. He had given them peace, they returned with chains. And in that moment he knew this wasn't just war. This was the reckoning. Before his name echoed through history, there was the land. Saint-Domingue, now Haiti, was the richest colony France had ever known. Fields of sugar and coffee lined its coast, built on the backs of 500,000 enslaved Africans. They were beaten, branded, and worked to death beneath a sun that gave no mercy. Born in chains, buried without names. Above them, the white elite lived in luxury. A few free people of color rose to wealth, but never power. The hierarchy was clear, the cruelty was absolute. Then came 1789. In France, the king fell and revolution rose. Liberté, égalité, fraternité. The colonists scoffed. Not for Africans, they said, not for slaves. But the enslaved were listening. They heard the words in sermons and gossip, in drunken boasts and whispers in the dark. And something buried began to stir. The message spread. In songs, in stories, in the beat of forbidden drums, and then, in August 1791, they gathered. A forest clearing, hundreds of enslaved men and women, torches lit, eyes wide, hearts pounding. At the center stood Boukman Duty, Vodou priest, former slave, calling on spirits older than empire. Beside him, Cécile Fatiment swayed in trance, her voice ringing like prophecy. A pig was sacrificed, blood met earth, and the vow was sworn. We will be free, or we will die. And when the spirits heard them, they answered with fire. It didn't begin with a declaration. There were no uniforms, no flags. It began with fire. On the night of August 22nd, 1791, the northern plain of Saint-Domingue erupted. Cane fields, soaked in sweat and blood, caught the torchlight and ignited like dry tinder. Flames leapt from plantation to plantation, devouring the wealth of empire in minutes. Manor houses collapsed in smoke, sugar mills exploded, white colonists were dragged from their beds, overseers were hunted down with machetes, axes, sickles, tools once used in bondage, now in revolt. There was no general, no battle plan, just memory, rage, and resolve, carried on the wind like ash. To some it looked like chaos, but to those who lit the flames it was justice. Long delayed, now delivered. They didn't rise for politics, they rose for mothers taken, for fathers worked to death, for children buried behind the cane rows. Some carried stolen muskets, most carried blades, all carried fury. By week's end, over 1,000 plantations lay in ruins. The sky was thick with smoke. The colony staggered. The French called it savagery, but for the enslaved, it was breath. The first breath of freedom in a world that had suffocated them for centuries. This was not a riot. It was organized, planned. An oath had been made, the spirits had been called, and the fire was only beginning. But then, one of the fire starters fell. Boukman Tutti, the Vodou priest who led the ceremony, was captured within weeks. He was executed, his head placed on a spike in Le Cap. The sign beneath it read, "This is the leader of the rebels." But it was too late, because you can kill a man, you can silence his name, but you cannot burn what is already on fire. As Saint-Domingue burned, most saw destruction. Toussaint Louverture saw something else. He was not yet a soldier. He was a coachman, a healer, a reader of books and people. A freedman in his 40s who had once labored on the same plantations, now in flames. He taught himself to read by candlelight, studied philosophers, generals, scripture, but he also knew the land, its roads, ravines, and rebel paths carved through the hills. He understood people, he understood power, and now he would apply both. He hadn't started the revolution, but he would shape it. While others charged into vengeance, he stepped in with order. He trained men to march, to aim, to follow. He turned chaos into discipline, anger into strategy. He joined with Spain, France's enemy, and won early victories under their banner, but when revolutionary France abolished slavery in 1794, he changed sides. He broke from Spain, pledged loyalty to the Republic, and brought his army with him. From that moment, he became the revolution's center of gravity. He drove out the Spanish, repelled the British, crushed counter-revolts, and then he rebuilt. Plantations reopened with paid labor. Vengeance was outlawed. Idleness punished. Discipline enforced even among the free. To some he was a liberator, to others a dictator. To Toussaint, he was the only thing standing between freedom and collapse. By 1801, he wasn't just the general, he was the government. He wrote a new constitution. It abolished slavery, declared equality, asserted autonomy, and named him governor for life. He still flew the French flag, still wrote to Paris as a loyal subject, but Paris didn't see loyalty. It saw a black man ruling without permission. And in a world built on white rule, that wasn't governance. It was revolution. And in France, one man had decided that revolution had gone far enough. Saint-Domingue was no longer burning. The plantations were working. Ships once again crowded the port, and the colony, scarred by revolution, was standing. Not through terror or chaos, but through law, labor, and discipline. Toussaint Louverture governed with the same precision he once brought to war. He demanded order, rewarded production, punished disorder, and believed deeply that freedom to endure had to be organized. He had done what no man in his position had ever done. Defeated empires, restored an economy, and held a nation together under the banner of equality. And still, he addressed France as a loyal son of the Republic. He sent them trade. He sent them reports. He sent them peace. What he didn't know was that Paris had stopped listening. The revolution that had once shouted liberté, égalité, fraternité now spoke in the voice of empire. And at its center stood a man who had no interest in shared power. Napoleon Bonaparte did not govern with partners. He ruled alone. When he looked across the Atlantic, he didn't see a colony loyal to France. He saw a black general acting without orders, writing laws, signing treaties, calling himself governor for life. Toussaint's constitution wasn't just ink on paper. It was proof that a former slave could govern not with vengeance, but with vision. That a black man could wield power with discipline, diplomacy, and restraint. And that was what made him dangerous. Not his army, not his titles, but the idea he represented. Because if Toussaint Louverture could rule a colony, what else might the enslaved believe they could do? Napoleon saw the future flickering in that constitution, and he moved to snuff it out. There would be no debate, no negotiation, only force. He signed the order, 40,000 troops, veterans of Europe's bloodiest campaigns, led by his brother-in-law, General Charles Leclerc. Their mission was simple: crush the rebellion by any means necessary. As the ships appeared on the horizon, sails thick as storm clouds, a letter from Paris arrived at Toussaint's estate. Sealed, official, stamped with the weight of empire. He stood in silence, holding it in his hand, the wind stirring through the mountains he had once defended. He didn't open it, he didn't need to. He had sent them laws, they had sent him chains. And now, he would send them fire. They tried to kill the revolution before it could rise, but Toussaint was ready. The empire had come, and the war was just beginning. In the next video, we follow France's invasion, Toussaint's final stand, and the brutal betrayal that changed everything. Don't let this history vanish. Like, subscribe, and join us for the next chapter before it's erased again.